Um, yeah, and I'm curious, like as the concert master, to listeners that might not be aware, um, you're basically after the conductor of the orchestra, you're kind of the face of the orchestra, right? In many ways. So can you talk a little bit about the roles and the duties of a concertmaster in a major orchestra and what all that looks like?
Sure. It really depends on like the country you're in.
Sure.
I've worked in London, worked in Asia, and I've worked in the States. It really does depend. But like, okay, for the sake for simplicity's sake, let's talk about in the States. You know, like a concert master is a very forward facing job, and in a lot of cases, the most consistent high ranking position in an orchestra because a music director will be there what 8 to 10 weeks a year, and then the
Mhm.
rest of the time we're working with guest conductors. So I think you need someone in that leadership position there that is more boots on the ground.
Mhm.
Um, and so it'll be uh, a lot of times I understand how the orchestra works. I know
Mhm.
what the quirks are. I know what the strengths are. And when a guest conductor comes in from like Europe and is like working with our orchestra,
Mhm.
many times I can streamline their process of like, hey, like let's do this here. We're gonna play like this. We're
Mhm.
gonna we have to watch out for this here. You know, this is the kind of stuff that our orchestra needs to work on. So like, if you conducted it this way, or if you helped us like this would be much more successful.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm basically like I always say it's like the traffic cop between the musicians and whoever the conductor is on stage.
Mhm.
And so that's my day in day out. That's like the playing aspect of the job. On
Mhm.
top of that, as a concertmaster, you know you're oftentimes in a lot of committees, whether that
Right.
be like artistic committees
Mhm.
or like feature planning committees when the
Mhm.
orchestra what we want the orchestra to look like. A lot of times I'm working with the board and the staff to make changes or see what's possible in terms of future outlook,
Mhm.
um, like whether we want to do recording, whether we
Mhm.
want to tour, whether we want to play outreach gigs. A lot of this kind of stuff. I think they also like. I luckily work in an orchestra where they do look for our opinions. So it's also facilitating that on top, and also there are fundraising, you know, uh, situations that I find myself in because they do use us for a lot for marketing, and
Mhm.
so a lot of our donors and patrons, I guess, find it fun to meet a lot of our musicians, and I oftentimes I'll be the musician representative for the orchestra. So
Mhm.
it's kind of this multifaceted of like um, semi management planning,
Mhm.
donors and development, and then there's the butt in the seat playing side of the job.
Right. Yeah, and so it sounds like it's a combination of a lot of artistic leadership and administrative leadership.
For sure.
But to talk a little bit more about like the nuts and bolts of, sitting in a concertmaster's chair, um, was it something that you were, let's say, just naturally like you understood how that position worked, or is that something you had to grow with over time? Like, because I'm sure you've probably sat concertmasters for like different school orchestra concerts, but I'm sure that's probably not obviously like the same as like sitting in a professional orchestra as concertmaster.
Um, I mean, the skills are transferable. I think
Mm.
um, the nuts and bolts. I mean, I think in a professional orchestra, it's a lot easier because everyone kind of knows what's going on already, as opposed
Right.
to in school orchestra. The front half is trying really hard. The back half never want to be there, or they'll purpose there, but they're all
Right.
asleep.
Right.
We've all been in conservatories. We know how this works.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and actually, in some cases, professional orchestras, it's the same.
Yeah.
The back half doesn't want to be there. So it just
Yeah.
really depends on which orchestra you're working with.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I think I've never. It's definitely something that I've learned through the experience, and I think I
Mhm,
was really lucky because like they now that I think back to it, to give a 24-year-old kid the co-leader job in the London Philharmonic is
mhm,
actually kind of a crazy situation. If I
mhm,
was given the executive power to whether to do it or not, I don't know
mhm,
if I would make that
mhm,
same decision to like
mhm,
offer that job. But I'm very thankful that they took a gamble on me. And
mhm,
being oblivious when you first walk into the job is so helpful. You know, like I imagine if you gave someone who actually knew what that job entailed, they would have probably navigated it a lot differently.
mhm,
Because like I had just graduated from Curtis. Like I was very
mhm,
lucky. Everything lined up perfectly.
mhm,
I walked into my LPO job just like thinking it was like a summer festival sort of situation. I didn't
mhm,
like actually realize how important of a job that was and how
mhm.
big. I mean, like we were touring like 3, 4 times, like major times a
Yeah,
year, and
yeah,
like we're talking major tours, like weeks at a time.
right.
Um, and so I just thought that was kind of cool, and I was just
Yeah,
like this happy-go-lucky, innocent-minded kid.
right.
Um, and so like I was telling the old British, like the seasoned veteran British players, like, oh
Mhm,
no, we gotta play like this. Oh, we gotta
mhm,
do this.
mhm,
We gotta do that. And they were all like extremely kind. Maybe they thought it was
mhm.
like, oh, this is cute. Like some American young kid is gonna come in and tell us what to do.
Right.
And but they always like respected me and gave me the time of day. And like
Mhm,
I think that built a lot of confidence in me. It's like,
mhm,
okay, I know what works, I know what doesn't work.
mhm,
And I was afforded this environment where they were all extremely kind and helpful.
mhm,
And so one, I built the confidence to do it. And two, like if I ever made a mistake, I
mhm.
was never like crucified for the mistake. They were all
Right.
always like, oh, maybe this is slightly better, maybe that is
Mhm,
slightly better. But it also takes, you know, a little bit of ego checking on your part to be
mhm.
like, okay, I can't just always tell people what to do. I need to absorb everything that's happening around me, um, so that I can learn this job as quickly as possible. So it's a combination of both.
Okay. Well, and I'm curious, prior to you landing the London Phil job, did you play for any concert masters throughout like the US? Because I know oftentimes teachers that have that concert master experience will sometimes work with students or work with people that are taking these auditions and kind of um, I guess give suggestions on how to lead the orchestra or lead the section with gestures and things like that. Is that something that you had any experience with before you landed the London job or
I had lessons on like excerpts.
right?
I definitely played for a lot of people, a lot of concert masters. But no one really teaches like leading, how to lead. And
Oh,
I honestly like I wouldn't know how to either. Just
mhm,
it's such a individual and it's such an individual thing. And so
mhm,
like if I taught it to someone else, I think it would come off as not genuine. And everyone leads so different. But I think the best way to practice and train for it is
mhm,
actually to play quartets or play chamber music, play small
mhm,
ensembles,
mhm,
because that's you know how you lead your quartet or your other members is
right.
exactly what is going to be helpful for an entire section.
Mhm,
So I don't think you should necessarily force the
mhm,
way you're leading because like
mhm,
you go to any orchestra concert, you can tell like who's
mhm.
like, oh, they practice that, and it
Yeah.
won't feel genuine.
Oh, yeah.
Like that's a lot of times you'll see principals or like it's not organic.
Mhm,
But then the I in my opinion the really great leaders are the ones that just do it naturally. Like they
yeah.
don't like I don't think it's like, oh, okay, I'm gonna cue it exactly at this time right now, and like this is the type of cue. And I never think about this kind of stuff. I'm just like
Mhm,
I'm gonna play in a way that makes sense to the music, and if I'm gonna make sure to play it in time with I don't know X, Y, and Z, whoever is playing with me at the time. I need to listen to their subdivisions. I need to listen to um, the bass line over there. Like that's the kind of stuff that's going on in my head. I'm always like, who am I
Mm,
playing with? Who am I listening to?
mm,
I'm never thinking it's like, okay, this I'm gonna cue right here. We're all gonna come in here.
right.
So
Yeah.
I think a lot of people times your section and other people will look to you as to when to play
Mhm.
and how to play it, but they won't like just because you do that cue doesn't mean everyone's going to come in
Sure.
perfectly in time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think if you can just adjust, it's like, okay, I am going to play the way that everyone in a way where it makes sense to everybody. I think that's the best kind of leader.
hmm Yeah. And this reminds me because I had your colleague and friend Austin Huntington on a couple episodes ago, and he was
Yep.
sharing with me how looking back on his earlier days as principal of ISO, he was saying that, sometimes he would give critiques that looking back now, he would have probably said it differently. And so I'm
Yeah, of
wondering,
course.
like, you probably have those memories where you're like, oh, like could have like done things a little bit more judiciously, maybe, or I don't know.
I think I don't know. I think I don't regret anything I've ever said, thankfully, because
Right,
I
right.
think I'm more with the camp of like, oh, if you don't need to say something, don't say it. So
Okay.
I actually rarely say anything unless it's like a bowing change
Mm-mm,
or there was something like, for example, today we're in Singapore today. I'm
mm-mm,
playing Beethoven 2,
mm-mm,
and in the slow movement, there's this weird trill stuff, and every conductor wants to play it differently, and it's like
mm-mm,
not the way it's actually written in the music. Like for example, that kind of stuff that you have to demonstrate and you have to talk about.
mm-mm.
But a lot of times, like if we play through something and it's not together, it'll probably be fine the second or third time. Like
Right, right, right.
and and you also have to think. You also have to empathize in a way where it's like, okay, you're in the back of the section. You've played in this orchestra 20, 30 years.
Mm.
Just because it's not together once, you don't want to be scolded by some like kid in the front on the first time. Like just trust them that it'll be fine. And
Yeah.
so putting yourself in their shoes and imagining and thinking about what they need and where they're at is actually, I think, is a great leadership skill, a necessary leadership skill.
Yeah.
And so, also just having trust. And a lot of times, like the first rehearsal, just I don't say anything because a lot of things will naturally fix itself. Like, and to be fair, like you also have to keep in mind, probably 25% of the orchestra didn't look at the music. It's just natural.
Mm,
And so a lot of times first day is just like the sight reading practicing thing. And
mm,
oftentimes day two, day three, it'll be fine. And I
mm,
mean, if it gets to the point where it's like dress rehearsal, it's still not together,
mm.
then you could, start putting your foot down. It's like, hey, this is not cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't think I've said anything to that I've regretted per
Mm.
se, but I'm sure there are um instances where I felt like I could do a better job,
Sure, sure.
definitely.
Yeah.
But then again, I also looking back, I was like, that's probably the best that I could have done at the time. There's no point regretting. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Just move on.